Bottom line, I simply want to make ever better car, no matter what kind of the powertrain they have.
Ongoing reports tell us that Toyota has just filed a patent, and the details describe a powerful engine that could destroy the EV ecosystem as we know it. Unlike their infamous hydrogen engines, Toyota's new machine runs on water, doesn't need a lithium battery, produces zero emissions, has no high-pressure tanks, and is affordable enough for both budget and flagship vehicles.
Now we're ready to deliver to the customers.
With features sounding too good to be true, how was Toyota allegedly able to break the laws of physics, and what other secrets were hidden in the patent? Stay till the end as we fully unpack the features, story, and mysteries behind Toyota's new engine.
日本の歴史に重ね合わせれば、それは明治維新です。ご覧ください。新しい時代の幕開けです。
How will it work? It is often said that the first CEO whose company can launch a water engine would also be the world's first trillionaire. As big as it sounds, that was the goal of Toyota's former CEO, Akio Toyoda. He had been at the company's helm since mid-2009, and he envisioned a world without pollution from vehicles. Now, building upon his work, Toyota's current CEO, Koji Sato, plans to pull this off through a new engine that functions better than hydrogen machines. How Koji plans to do this is very complex. So let's break it down. Usually when people think about cars having water engines, what they really mean are hydrogen cars. These special vehicles usually use hydrogen gas that is provided by very large manufacturing plants. The hydrogen gas is produced in these plants by the extraction of hydrogen from water through electrolysis and distributed to refueling stations across the country. This is what keeps the hydrogen fuel cell engines running in these cars. These older engines work removing oxygen from the air and adding it to the hydrogen fuel to produce water and electricity. It is the same mechanism that drives the Toyota Mirai. And though it was seen as a positive step in reducing carbon emissions, it had significant problems to deal with. For one, producing the hydrogen needed to fuel the car was very expensive. Also, while it is always easy to find a gas station or normal auto repair center to fix and repair gasoline cars, it was much harder to find the right stations for cars that run on hydrogen. Finally, splitting and extracting hydrogen from water takes too much energy. This amount is much more than the energy gotten back from the engine after the reaction. So while it was much friendlier to the environment than combustion engines, it wasn't practical enough to be used every day. Now this is where Toyota's new engine comes in. Toyota's new engine will produce the energy within the car, and with near-instant electrolysis, it would be done in a way that is much smarter and more efficient. How would this work? By using string components as part of the engine. These are special, slender materials that guide electricity in a way that uses less power. This new engine uses more water than hydrogen. So instead of storing pure hydrogen in big tanks that are risky and expensive, most of what you need for this engine to keep going is water, which is very cheap and easy to keep. The engine splits the water when it needs to, and instead of doing it all at once, it does so in small amounts to make the process much safer and smarter. Thanks to this feature, Toyota's new engine promises to solve the big problem with water engines ever since the first one was made by Stanley Meyer in 1995. While his tragic story will be discussed later on in this video, the main takeaway for now is that Toyota's version promises to use the latest modern technologies to get as much energy out of each drop while capturing leftover power from the reaction and reusing it. Though it still exists as a prototype, the journey to this point has been nothing short of breathtaking, going all the way back to 2009 with Toyota's former CEO and visionary Akio Toyoda. Akio at this point had a strong background in the auto industry, and he saw great potential in pushing Toyota's green initiatives in their latest models to greater heights than ever before. Toyota's story from this point defines the groundbreaking engine announced recently, so without further ado, let's get to it. The story behind the engine. To fully unpack how making this groundbreaking engine was even possible, we'll start from 2008, the year when electric cars at the time were still going mainstream, and Tesla had launched their first EV, the Roadster, long after Toyota had tried to release their EVs, but to very low success in 1997 and 2002. But even with the low sales numbers, these cars were celebrated for their outstanding luxuries and eco-friendly features. Like losing billions of dollars and falling behind the competition wasn't bad enough. Another big issue for Toyota was that even though they were all about protecting the environment, the reality was that manufacturing EV batteries released much more greenhouse gases than producing gasoline cars. Akio Toyota wanted to make a vehicle that posed no threat to the environment and ran entirely on water without needing large batteries produced by greenhouse chemicals. The problem was that the vision he had seemed too good to be true for multiple reasons. One, even though the force of water can be used to generate electricity, water on its own doesn't naturally store energy that can be released to power something as powerful as a car. Secondly, the only way to extract power from water is by splitting off the hydrogen in it, and the problem with that is that extracting hydrogen from water requires a great amount of electricity. Last of all, many scientists argue that machines can't create more energy than they use, and since water doesn't naturally store energy, it would have to break the law of thermodynamics to work properly. Realizing how far off his dream was, the company decided to start small. To stay competitive, the company released the Toyota Prius, which ran in a hybrid system by relying on gasoline and an electric motor. Sadly, that car was quickly overtaken by Tesla, another EV manufacturer that people preferred for their more futuristic looks and practical features. Tesla cars were much quieter and cleaner and didn't need gasoline at all. Leaving that behind, Toyota took its first step into making the car the CEO had envisioned, and the result of their work was the original Mirai. This was the first mass-produced hydrogen fuel cell vehicle produced by the company, and it worked by using two pressure tanks made of plastic reinforced by carbon fiber and produced electricity by combining oxygen from surrounding air with the hydrogen fuel. The electricity was used to power the motor and only produced water vapor as its emission. While Tesla focused on making their EVs cheaper and more practical, Toyota felt stuck with trying something much different. They believed in hydrogen cars as the future, but there was another big problem. Nobody could fuel the car. Since it ran on hydrogen, refueling it wasn't as simple as going to the nearest gas station. And hydrogen stations, with all the resources needed for the car to function properly, were very rare. In the United States, there were only 15 stations, and at least 9 of them were in California alone. It was much worse in other countries, where very few stations were either out of service from 2015 or too far away to get to. Many users returned their cars because of how pointless it was to have one, with some of them taking the company to court for selling a vehicle that wasn't useful at such a high cost. It got so bad that Toyota started giving free hydrogen refuels for several months. Other times, they gave up to 50% discounts on repairs to keep the engagement going for as long as possible. But that wasn't enough to keep users invested. So while Tesla's Model 3 sold hundreds of thousands every year, in over 10 years, Toyota sold less than 15,000 Mirais in total. Even hardcore fans of Toyota's most expensive products said it was too stressful to use. But the company hadn't given up yet. They still had a final ace up their sleeve, and they launched it in 2021 as a special upgrade to the Mirai. The second-generation Mirai had a much better design and a longer range, going above 400 miles on a full tank. Even in 2021, there were very few hydrogen stations around, and they were still very expensive to use. And while the world wrestled with Toyota's questionable choices, Tesla was building more chargers, improving their batteries, and opening new factories in China, Germany, and Texas. Toyota's biggest competitor had grown into a global tech empire with better self-driving software, solar panels, and less polluting battery production and storage systems. While this was happening, it seemed Toyota was falling behind. Wanting to invest in the more successful EV industry, Toyota released their first electric SUV in 2022. But more problems arose when users complained about their tires suddenly falling off on dangerous highways. During this time, the future of Toyota was looking grim. Not only were their EVs failing to gain traction, but the brand as a whole had become known by critics as the BlackBerry of cars, stuck in the past while other brands kept racing ahead. They needed to do something soon because the once beloved brand was now looked down upon by users and vastly overtaken by the competition. But things started looking hopeful for the company once again in 2023, when Akio Toyoda stepped down from his role as CEO and was replaced by Koji Sato as leader of the Motor Corporation. Once Koji took over, he started work immediately on the company's endeavors in making hydrogen-powered vehicles. Electric cars had won the race by a long shot.
Electric vehicles, all the rage, very popular here in the Valley.
And the company's investors were growing nervous. And even though the government heavily supported their work in Japan, people were generally uninterested. But right when it seemed there was no hope on the horizon, something very interesting happened. Blueprints for Toyota's new engine. You see, in late 2024, while it seemed Toyota was trying its best to act like their hydrogen cars never existed, the company's CEO, Koji Sato, surprised the world by privately filing a patent several months before making it public. Those who examined the patent thought it was Koji's final attempt at making a hydrogen fuel cell engine that would fail as it always did when compared to Tesla's more efficient products. But they were wrong. This patent wasn't for another hydrogen-powered vehicle, at least not in the way people thought it would be. It was something even more outrageous than the hydrogen patents. If the reports are accurate, what the document described was a car that ran on water through a small onboard system that used electrolysis to split water into hydrogen and oxygen. As we know, this process is normally used in very large production plants to make hydrogen fuel for hydrogen-fueled cars like the Mirai. It required a lot of energy and very large machines to pull off, but this system was designed to work inside the car without big tanks and high-pressure pumps. All the car would need is a normal tank that is capable of carrying distilled water. Yes, plain water. This water would be used by the system to extract hydrogen in a way that is used immediately with little to no safety hazards. With the plan for this engine underway, Toyota's current CEO, Koji Sato, believes there would be no more searching for hydrogen stations or waiting for delivery trucks to bring in special fuel. All users would need is clean water and a smart little machine under the hood. Based on the details found within the patent, Toyota's new engine will be strong and reliable while also being cheap and friendly to the environment. With this new engine, Toyota is promising a future where there would be very little need for oil extraction. All everyone would need going forward would be access to clean water. Because it doesn't use gas or big batteries, the engine would produce no pollution from burning fuel. There would be no damage to the earth from digging for lithium, and since clean water is very easy to get, it would be the perfect fuel, especially in places where electricity is scarce. The plan is to make this engine cheap and accessible to everyone, implying that the cars using this engine would range from budget vehicles to luxury items. The engine would not be used to power flagship cars alone, but the everyday vehicles used in small towns and suburban areas that rely too much on gas and pollute the environment. But given the billions of dollars spent, the heavy failures of the Mirai, and the many potential dangers of hydrogen, one simple question needs to be addressed. Is it worth it? There was a time when people thought hydrogen engines were the future. After all, hydrogen as a gas is clean when it's used and does little harm to the environment, except that isn't true. Apart from how expensive and impractical it is to the industry, long studies also show that producing hydrogen for EVs does more harm than good to the environment, almost as much as traditional combustion engines do. How so, you ask? Well, this is where it gets interesting. You see, while electrolysis is used to get hydrogen out of water with electricity, as we've said, the problem is that it uses a lot of energy. Can you guess where that energy comes from? That's right, active coal and gas power plants, the same energy sources that are known for endless pollution and harm to the environment. This is because it is practically impossible to rely on renewable sources of energy for producing hydrogen. Let's not forget that it's also very expensive. So expensive, in fact, that some hydrogen producers are now relying on fossil fuels to do it instead of electrolysis through steam methane reforming. This process happens through a chemical reaction that splits and extracts hydrogen from natural gas. The problem is that while this hydrogen can be used to power EVs, the carbon dioxide left behind is still released into the air and harms the planet. So while hydrogen cars don't pollute the environment, the way we make hydrogen still worsens the problem. But that's not all. There are also many safety hazards to worry about with hydrogen fuel cell engines. Hydrogen is the smallest and lightest gas in the world, and that means it leaks very easily and causes massive explosions from the smallest sparks. For this reason, hydrogen tanks are made with expensive materials under high pressure. One cannot imagine how destructive it would be when the walls of such an engine crack during an accident or an unexpected hardware failure. So how does Toyota's new water engine remove this danger? By making sure hydrogen exists within the car only when it is needed. Instead of using hydrogen gas tanks, this engine would use regular water and only extract hydrogen when the car moves at a high enough speed. With this smart method, hydrogen in its pure and dangerous form would not be found anywhere in the car until it's moving. Once the car stops, so does hydrogen production. Driving would not only be much safer, but a lot more energy efficient as well. Many have imagined a future where all someone would need to refuel a car is a water hose instead of having to drive to a gas station. With Toyota's new engine on the horizon, that dream is now becoming a reality. But with the future of the oil and gas industry on the line, and the company's failures with the Toyota Mirai, one other question lingers on people's minds. Is it practical? The simple answer is yes. Water engines are more practical than most people think. The first person to propose this less than a decade ago was an Iranian scientist named Alaeddin Qasemi, who invented a car that uses water as fuel. This happened way back in 2018, and the scientist demonstrated how practical it was by driving up to 900 kilometers on just 60 liters of water. All it produced was water vapor as waste with little to no carbon footprints that could be traced back to it. The fact that a scientist was able to convert his old car to a modern water-powered vehicle was mind-blowing. This bent the brains of scientists around the world, with some of them refusing to believe this was real. Others claimed that it broke the laws of thermodynamics by running on water alone, even though Qasemi opened the car for people to examine and drove it over long distances to prove how real it was. This showed that water engines are not too expensive to produce, and all technicians need to do is figure out cheaper ways of producing them in large quantities. With the things Toyota is promising matching closely to what Qasemi demonstrated back in 2018, it's safe to say that while the rest of the world was debating on whether his product was real or not, the engineers at Toyota were taking notes. It never gets more practical than this. There is no need for oil extractions to harm the Earth's surface for fossil fuels, and there is no need to keep buying and storing explosive chemicals in moving vehicles. Plus, they are simpler and cheaper to produce. One unconfirmed source claims that the new engine will produce 3 times more energy than the hydrogen engine that drives the Toyota Mirai. And while this sounds almost impossible, it is not too far from what the patent allegedly implies. So unless you are one of those who loves driving above the speed limit on both busy streets and open highways, Toyota's engine would be a great option for everyone looking for an affordable option in the ever-expanding EV market. With that said, let's now address the elephant in the room. Like most people, you too might be wondering at this point, if water engines are so cheap and practical to make, then why haven't car companies that specialize in renewable energy, like Tesla and BYD, made them in large numbers? If it's so easy to build, then why isn't Alaeddin Qasemi working with big countries or getting support from experts with all the money needed? And why hasn't anyone else in the world repeated the same process to build the same kind of engine that gets the same results? Are water engines really the future as most people hope? Sadly, it is one tragic story that holds all the answers, one that is still being investigated among several groups within and beyond the auto industry. Stanley's tragedy. Born in the early 40s and working as an engineer in Ohio, Stanley Meyer was a man who grew up loving science and machines, and sometime in the 80s, he shocked the world by claiming he built a car that only ran on water. As expected, this claim made him a laughingstock in the growing science community, but that was until 1984, when Stanley showed the world that it wasn't a joke by explaining how it would work. He called the new engine he was working on a water fuel cell that could use hydrogen from water as fuel with electricity gotten from a cheap and easily rechargeable battery.
Developed the water fuel cell as a retrofit energy systems to conventional cars.
He even claimed the car would go across the entire country on just over 20 gallons of water. By 1985, the leading engineers who worked with him started filing for patents to protect what he had invented. They believed what they saw him create was so powerful that it could bring an end to multiple billion-dollar industries in just a few years. They needed to make sure the right to make such a machine belonged only to Stanley and those who worked with him. In 1990, Stanley was finished with his engine and put it in a car. He called the water-powered car the Dune Buggy and drove it around Grove City, the place where he lived in Ohio. Local news stations came to see it, and even a Belgian group of investors came to discuss building more of his engines with good deals. But in the midst of great attention and fame, something much stranger was happening. Even though his engine had great potential, no big automaker gave support. What's worse, Stanley was allegedly offered $1 billion by oil companies to stop what he was doing. The problem was Stanley was headstrong and stubborn, refusing to stop his work even though he was offered huge sums beyond anything he'd ever dreamed of. And then came the tragic part. On March 20th, 1998, Stanley was having dinner at a restaurant in Grove City with his brother Stephen and 2 Belgian investors. After taking a sip of cranberry juice, Stanley suddenly got up, looking uncomfortable. Barely a few seconds later, he grabbed his throat and ran out of the restaurant without saying a word. Stephen went after him to know what was wrong, only to find his brother lying on the ground in the parking lot. He passed away before help could arrive. Later on, after long hours of investigations, the Franklin County coroner said he died from a cerebral aneurysm. However, Stanley's brother Stephen and others believed he was poisoned. After his death, no one was able to fully recreate the machine he built. The strange part is that Stanley's patents have gone public for a long time, but no major company has built a working version that proves it really works the way he said. Stranger yet, no one knows for sure when Stanley Meyer's water-powered dune buggy was last shown in public. After he died in 1998, the car was entangled in a legal tug-of-war and was never put in public ever again. Where the dune buggy is today and who keeps it is still up in the air. Even without the tragic story, the hydrogen engine still has issues based on what was explained that weren't addressed during the announcement. As most would expect with announcements like this, the issues with these engines are probably being addressed as the machine remains a prototype. But that isn't the whole story. John's forgotten reactor. The less troubling story of an old water-powered car tells of another visionary named Daniel Dingle. Born in the Philippines with a deep love for engineering,
the credits to a Filipino scientist named Daniel Dingle.
Daniel Dingle was also best known for claiming to have invented a car that could run on water. It all began in 1969 when Daniel started experimenting with a machine he believed could split water into hydrogen and oxygen. His idea was pretty much the same theory behind the Toyota Mirai and other hydrogen-powered cars today. So when he announced what he had done and promised that his engine would replace gasoline with no emissions,
they say that maybe there is gasoline hidden there. You cannot mix hydrogen with gasoline.
many people were interested to see what he had to offer. Not one to shy away from a challenge, Daniel wasted no time in showcasing his invention to the world. He did this in 1996 with a modified Toyota Corolla he adapted to fit his engine. This demonstration was a huge success and became so popular that it got the attention of some government officials and engineers. But when the few foreign investors at the demo asked for the secret behind how his engine ran in water, Daniel agreed to only reveal his secrets if they promised to hire 200 native people looking for employment. When that didn't happen, Daniel chose to keep demonstrating his water engine without revealing how his little machine was capable of extracting hydrogen from water on the fly. Daniel Dingle was so confident that he went on to present his car to the country's president, Corazon Aquino. The country's president was so impressed by his work that she spent lots of money by allowing the Ministry of Science and Technology to investigate the invention. And that was where the problem started. After weeks of close examination, the Ministry of Science and Technology said in their reports that they found traces of gasoline in the water that fueled the car. When Daniel was confronted about it, he said that traces of gasoline were needed to start the vehicle, while the water, which was over 95% of the fuel, was used to keep it moving. The problem was that Daniel and earlier marketed the car as something that required no gasoline and produced no emissions. So when scientists and engineers funded by the government were seeing traces of gasoline in the water, nobody thought his work was anything special. One state senator, Aquilino Pimentel, put out a statement about this, even though very few members of Congress were on his side. The minority senator was upset that the Philippine science community had tossed Daniel and everything he had to offer and lost the chance to invest in something very important. But that was just the beginning. Later on, in early 2000, a famous businessman named John Ding Young, who worked as part of a giant company, heard about Dingle's invention. His company, Formosa Plastics Group, was very interested in his invention and allegedly wanted to make Daniel's dream of a clean atmosphere with no emissions a reality. As a sign of goodwill, John gave Daniel $30,000 and another $20,000 to help his research. Almost nobody trusted Daniel after the scandal of gasoline found in his water tank. To make up for it, he had promised to build a better engine that didn't need traces of gasoline to start anymore. With the money gotten from John, Daniel promised to build the prototype cars needed to run in his improved hydrogen reactor. Not long after, John traveled to Taipei, where John's company was to ask for even more money. He allegedly needed $300,000 to buy 3 cars and turn them into the cars that best fit his new engine. After Daniel pitched his plan once again to John, he was given the full amount and another $60,000 in late 2001, just as they discussed. Over 5 years passed and there was no response from Daniel. There is no hydrogen reactor, no working cars, and not even a slightly better demonstration. Realizing he might have been scammed, John Ding took the matter to court. And in December 2008, the court examined the case and decided that Daniel had lied all along and declared him guilty of swindling. For this reason, Daniel Dingle was sentenced to a maximum of 20 years in prison. But even after he was convicted, he still repeated the words he said in court, insisting that his invention was real and government officials were using the narrative to protect their greedy corporations and keep the truth from everyone. For 2 years, the world wondered who was telling the truth. But that was until October 18, 2010, when Daniel Dingle passed away in Metro Manila from unknown causes. His story became known for its mystery and controversy. On various forums today, discussing the possibility of Toyota's upcoming engine, Daniel Dingle's name, among many others, is often mentioned as a hero whose chance was taken away by greedy corporations not willing to let them move forward. For them, Toyota shouldn't be the first to release such a groundbreaking water engine, believing such an engine should have been introduced in the 80s and gone mainstream at least a decade ago. In the end, whether or not Stanley Meyer's dune buggy or Daniel Dingle's hydrogen reactor were genuine breakthroughs or overblown stories is still a bit uncertain. What we do know is their stories linger on to this day, and if Toyota pulls this off on its own, the engine will change the auto industry forever. So what do you think? Will Toyota's new engine be the game changer for the auto industry? Or do the reports tell another overblown tale? Let us know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed the video, please make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Also, click on the next video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.